Simone Lawson woke to the shrill insistence of her alarm clock, its digital numbers glowing. 7 a.m. in the dim light of her bedroom. For a few disorienting seconds, she couldn't place where she was. The cool, empty expanse of mattress beside her brought reality crashing back. The divorce had been finalized exactly 3 months ago. Darnell was gone, living with his new girlfriend in some trendy loft across town. And this modest one-bedroom apartment in Midtown Atlanta now belonged solely to her. At 35, Simone felt as though her life had been cleaved neatly into before and after. Before, 12 years of marriage, shared dreams, weekend trips to Darnell's parents' house in the countryside, where she'd spend hours weeding their sprawling garden while he laughed and drank beer with old high school friends. After silence, an empty bed, and the daunting task of rebuilding everything from scratch. She threw off the covers, slipped into her worn terry cloth robe, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The electric kettle, the one appliance in the entire apartment that never failed. Her clicked off with its familiar hiss. Simone made coffee in the French press Darnell had left behind. Watching the dark liquid bloom, steam fogged the window as she gazed out at the gray April morning. Atlanta looked washed out, the skyline muted under low clouds. She sighed, a long exhale that carried months of accumulated grief. "Welcome to a new day," she whispered to herself, though it sounded hollow. Today was Monday, which meant another week at Prime Solutions Group, the small accounting firm where she'd started 2.5 months earlier. The name sounded grand, Prime Solutions. But the reality was 5 employees, crammed into 2 cramped rooms on the 3rd floor of a faded downtown commercial building. She'd found the job through her friend Sierra, who knew someone else. After the divorce, money had become an urgent problem. Lawyer fees, utilities, groceries, the basics of survival. Her old position at a large retail chain had become unbearable. Colleagues, offering pitying smiles, asking gentle questions she didn't want to answer. She'd needed a clean break, a place where no one knew her history. Prime Solutions had been that place. The director, Victor Sterling, a man in his mid-50s with thinning hair and a perpetually sour expression, had hired her quickly. He'd glanced at her resume, noted her 15 years of experience, asked a few perfunctory questions, and offered a salary that wasn't impressive but was livable. Simone had accepted on the spot. The work was routine, processing invoices, reconciling accounts, preparing quarterly reports. Nothing challenging for someone with her background. And best of all, no one pried. She finished her coffee, dressed in a simple navy skirt and white blouse, and left the apartment at exactly 8 a.m. The commute was predictable. 10 minutes walking to the MARTA station at Peachtree Center. 20 minutes on the train. Another 10-minute walk to the office building. She'd done it every weekday since starting the job, and the rhythm had become a small comfort. As she turned right out of her building and headed down the narrow side street toward the station, she passed the familiar figure, sitting on a flattened piece of cardboard near the entrance. An elderly black woman, always in the same faded wool coat despite the warming spring weather, sat quietly with a dented tin cup in front of her. A hand-lettered sign leaned against her knee. "Please help." Simone had noticed her the very first morning. The woman never called out, never rattled her cup or made eye contact aggressively. She simply sat, dignified in her silence, as if she'd long ago accepted whatever the world decided to give. Simone wasn't the type to empty her wallet for every person in need. But something about this woman tugged at her. Maybe it was the weary kindness in her eyes, or the way she seemed resigned rather than defeated. From that first day, Simone had dropped whatever change she had, $3 here, a $5 bill there, into the cup. The woman always nodded graciously and murmured, "Thank you, dear." Over the weeks, small conversations had blossomed. Simone learned her name was Ms. Thelma Mae Jenkins, that she was 79, and that she lived nearby but couldn't stay home. Simone never pushed for details. Everyone carried private burdens. This Monday morning was no different. Simone paused, fished in her purse, and pulled out a handful of coins, maybe $3 total. She bent slightly to drop them into the cup. Suddenly, dry, surprisingly strong fingers clamped around her wrist. Simone startled, looking down. Ms. Jenkins stared up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Listen to me, dear," the old woman whispered urgently, grip tightening. "Don't go home tonight. You hear me? Under no circumstances." Simone tried to gently pull away, but the fingers held firm. Ms. Jenkins? What are you talking about? Sleep somewhere else. A hotel, a friend's place, anywhere but home. Promise me. The woman's voice trembled. Her eyes glistened with something that looked like terror. A chill slid down Simone's spine despite the mild morning air. Commuters streamed past, earbuds in, eyes on phones, oblivious. Miss Jenkins, are you feeling all right? Has something happened? The old woman released her hand and leaned back against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Come here tomorrow morning. I'll show you everything. But don't go home tonight. You've done so much good for me these past months. Let me repay you. Listen to an old woman. Simone straightened slowly, staring down in confusion. The moment felt surreal. Ms. Jenkins turned her face away. Conversation clearly over. Someone tossed a coin. She nodded automatically, making the sign of the cross. Simone lingered another few seconds, then turned toward the station entrance. Her mind raced. Was this dementia? A senior moment? Or had the woman truly seen something dangerous? The entire train ride downtown, Simone replayed the exchange. By the time she reached the office building, she'd nearly convinced herself it was nothing. Just the ramblings of an elderly woman living a hard life. She took the rattling elevator to the 3rd floor and pushed open the door marked Prime Solutions Group. Kayla, the 20-something receptionist, glanced up from her phone long enough to mumble, "Morning." "Morning," Simone replied automatically, heading to her small office, a converted storage room with one window overlooking an alley. She settled at her desk, opened her laptop, and began the familiar routine, sorting emails, printing invoices, cross-checking expense reports. Normally the numbers soothed her, but today the old woman's warning gnawed at the edge of her concentration. Around noon, she stepped into the hallway for water from the cooler. There she ran into Kevin Barnes, the building's new security guard. He'd started about 6 weeks ago, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a buzz cut and a square jaw that gave him a perpetually stern look. They'd exchanged no more than polite nods until now. "Getting warm out there," Kevin remarked, filling a paper cup after her. "Spring came early this year," Simone agreed, keeping her tone neutral. He drank, then asked casually, "So what part of town do you live in?" The question landed oddly. Simone tensed. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Long commute?" "It's fine. Train's right there." She deliberately avoided giving details. Kevin nodded, crushed his cup, and headed back to his post near the entrance. Simone stood holding her water, unease growing. Why the sudden interest? They'd barely spoken before. Back at her desk, she tried to shake it off. But the morning's warning resurfaced. By 3 p.m., Victor Sterling appeared in her doorway holding a folder. "Simone, quick question," he said, pulling up the lone visitor chair. "These March invoices, did you verify client signatures?" She took the folder. The documents looked familiar, standard. Statements of work she'd processed last month. But Victor was right. 3 were missing signatures. "That's strange," she said, frowning. "I remember checking them. The signatures were there when I received them. I cross-referenced everything with the ledger." Victor rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe I'm mixing things up. Thanks anyway." He left quickly. Simone stared at the closed door. She was certain she hadn't missed those signatures. 15 years of experience had made her meticulous to a fault. The rest of the afternoon dragged under a cloud of tension. Simone jumped at footsteps in the hall, found herself listening for voices outside her door. When 6 p.m. finally arrived, she gathered her bag and left. Outside, twilight had fallen. Streetlights glowed orange. She walked toward the MARTA station on autopilot, then stopped dead on the sidewalk. "Don't go home tonight." People flowed around her. She stood frozen, heart thudding. Was she really going to let a homeless woman's warning dictate her life? It sounded ridiculous, yet the fear in Ms. Jenkins's eyes had been real. And Kevin's question, the missing signatures, were they connected? Simone pulled out her phone and searched for nearby hotels. She found an affordable extended stay place not far, booked a room for one night, and headed there instead of home. The hotel was an older building on a quiet street. The clerk, a young woman with pink-streaked hair, handed over a key card to a room with 4 bunk beds. Simone chose the lower bunk nearest the window, dropped her bag, and sat staring at the institutional white wall. What was she doing? Listening to a stranger's cryptic warning? She could have gone home, taken a hot shower, slept in her own bed. Yet anxiety coiled tight in her chest. She texted Sierra, "Spending the night away from home. We'll explain later." Sierra replied instantly, "Girl, did you finally meet somebody?" Simone didn't answer. She lay down fully clothed, staring at the underside of the bunk above. City sounds filtered in. Car horns, distant voices, the occasional siren. Sleep came fitfully near midnight, plagued by dreams of endless documents and unseen. Hands altering numbers behind her back. She woke abruptly at 4 a.m. to her phone buzzing. Sierra's name flashed on the screen. "Hello?" Simone answered groggily. "Simone, are you alive?" Sierra's voice was pure panic. "What? Of course. Your building's on fire. It's all over the news. Huge blaze, 3rd and 4th floors. Firefighters everywhere. Where are you?" Simone bolted upright, heart slamming against her ribs. "What did you say?" "Fire at your apartment building." "Were you home?" "No, I'm at a hotel. I texted you." "Thank God. Simone, what the hell is going on?" Simone couldn't answer. She dressed in seconds, grabbed her bag, and ran from the room. Down the stairs, out into the pre-dawn darkness. She ordered a ride share, gave her building's address, and sat white-knuckled as the car sped through empty streets. Her mind repeated one thing: Ms. Jenkins's terrified eyes and the words that had saved her life. The rideshare pulled up to the curb just as the first hints of dawn painted the sky a bruised purple. Simone stepped out onto the sidewalk and felt the heat before she saw the flames. Her apartment building, a modest 6-story brick structure she had called home for 8 years, was engulfed. Fire poured from the windows of the 3rd and 4th floors in angry orange torrents. Black smoke billowed upward, blotting out the early morning stars. Fire trucks lined the street, lights flashing red and white across the gathered crowd of neighbors in robes and pajamas. Hoses snaked across the pavement, pumping arcs of water that hissed and steamed against the inferno. Simone stood frozen, her overnight bag still slung over her shoulder. The 4th floor, her floor, was the worst. Her living room window, the one that overlooked the small courtyard, was a gaping mouth of fire. Everything she owned, furniture bought with Darnell on weekend trips to IKEA, the bookshelf filled with novels collected over decades, her clothes, her photographs, the few pieces of jewelry from her mother was being reduced to ash. A woman's sob broke through the roar of the flames. Simone recognized Mrs. Miller from 3B, wrapped in a blanket, tears streaming down her face. Old Mr. Peterson from the penthouse stood nearby, staring upward in stunned silence. The young Green family, parents and 2 small children, were being loaded into an ambulance, oxygen masks over burned faces. "Simone?" Mrs. Miller's voice cracked as she spotted her. "Oh, thank God, we thought you were inside." I stayed at a friend's," Simone lied automatically, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Mrs. Miller clutched her arm. "Your place. It's the worst. They said it started there." Simone nodded numbly. "Started there, on her floor, in her apartment." She backed away from the crowd and leaned against the building across the street, legs trembling. The reality crashed over her in waves. Someone had tried to kill her. The fire hadn't been an accident. It had been meant for her. If not for Ms. Jenkins's warning, she would have been asleep in her bed when the flames came. The sky lightened slowly. Simone watched firefighters battle the blaze for over 2 hours, until only smoke and the occasional flare-up remained. Around 6:30 a.m., a police officer approached her. "Ma'am, are you Simone R. Lawson, apartment 402? "Yes," she managed. He flipped open a small notepad. "You weren't home at the time of the fire?" "No, I was staying with a friend." He scribbled something. "Lucky. The Greens from 401 barely made it out. They're in the hospital with serious burns." "Any idea how this might have started?" Simone hesitated. Should she mention the homeless woman's warning? It would sound insane without proof. "No," she said finally. "I don't know." He nodded, handed her a card. "Investigators will be in touch. Call if you think of anything." She tucked the card away and checked her phone. 6:40 a.m. Ms. Jenkins had said to come in the morning. Simone ordered another rideshare and headed straight to Peachtree Center MARTA station. The morning commute was just beginning, people streaming toward trains with coffee cups in hand, but Simone barely noticed. Her mind replayed the fire, the smoke, the knowledge that someone had wanted her dead. She spotted Ms. Jenkins immediately, in the exact same spot on her piece of cardboard, tin cup in front. The old woman looked up as Simone approached and gave a small, solemn nod. Simone crouched beside her, voice shaking. Ms. Jenkins? The building. It burned. My apartment. Everything. I know, dear, Ms. Jenkins said softly. Thank God you listened. Simone's eyes filled with tears. How did you know? Miss Jenkins reached into her worn cloth bag and pulled out an old flip phone. The kind with physical buttons. Scratched and ancient. Here, look. Simone took it with trembling fingers. The screen showed a grainy photo clearly taken at night. It depicted the back alley behind her building, lit by a single weak street lamp. Two men stood near the basement entrance. One held what looked like a red gas can. That's my building, Simone whispered. It is, Ms. Jenkins confirmed. Night before last, they were poking around. Last night, around 10, I was sleeping in the stairwell next door. Came out for air and saw them again. One had a gas can. I knew it wasn't right. Snapped pictures quick before they saw me. They went into the basement, stayed maybe 15 minutes, came out with empty cans, then went upstairs. Few minutes later, smoke started pouring out. I banged on doors, yelled, "Fire!" till someone called the trucks. Simone scrolled. More photos, the men leaving the basement, one adjusting his jacket, another glancing around nervously. In the clearest shot, lit by the street lamp, one man's face was visible. Simone's breath caught. I know him. Ms. Jenkins nodded. Thought you might. He's been hanging around your building a few evenings. Heard him say your name once. Said it'll be the end of Simone tomorrow. Everything over. His name is Kevin Barnes, Simone said slowly. He's the security guard at my office. Miss Jenkins's eyes narrowed. Then you know something, child? Something they're scared of. But I don't, Simone protested. I'm just an accountant. I process invoices, track expenses. Think hard, Ms. Jenkins urged. Something in those papers. Something that don't sit right. Simone's mind flashed to yesterday. Victor Sterling showing her the March invoices with missing signatures. Her insistence that the signatures had been there when she received them. Sterling's worried expression. Yesterday, she said slowly, my boss asked about some invoices. Said client signatures were missing, but I know they were there when I checked them. I told him that. He looked nervous. Miss Jenkins murmured, there it is. They running something crooked through you. You started asking questions. They panicked. Decided to silence you permanent. Simone stared at the phone, heart pounding. Fraud. Her firm, tiny, unremarkable Prime Solutions was involved in fraud, and she'd unwittingly handled the documents. When she noticed the discrepancy, they'd chosen murder over exposure. What do I do? She asked, voice small. Go to the police, Miss Jenkins said firmly. Give them this phone. Photos prove who set the fire. Let them handle the rest. Simone clutched the phone. It's your phone. Your evidence. Child, it's a $20 flea market burner. I only use it for pictures. Take it. I don't need it. Simone looked into the old woman's eyes, tired, wise, kind. Thank you, she whispered. You saved my life. Ms. Jenkins smiled faintly. You saved mine first, dropping money every day, treating me like a person. Kindness comes back around. Now go, before they figure out you're still breathing. Simone stood, pocketed the phone, and walked the 10 minutes to the nearest precinct. Her legs felt like lead, but determination pushed her forward. Inside the brick building, she approached the desk sergeant. I need to report an attempted murder. He looked up, assessed her disheveled appearance, smoke-scented clothes. Third office down the hall. Detective on duty. Simone knocked and entered. The man behind the desk was mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, sharp gray eyes. His nameplate read Detective Marcus Hayes. Have a seat, he said, gesturing. Simone sat and poured out the entire story. The new job, daily kindness to Ms. Jenkins, the sudden warning, the strange question from Kevin, the missing signatures, staying at the hotel, waking to news of the fire, the photos on the phone. She laid the phone on his desk. Hayes listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When she finished, he picked up the phone and studied the images, zooming in on faces. You recognize one of them? Yes, Kevin Barnes, security guard at my firm. New hire. Hayes nodded. I'm seizing this as evidence. You'll get a receipt. Now write a full statement, everything you just told me, plus names, addresses, timelines. He slid a form across the desk. Simone's hand shook as she wrote. But she forced herself to be thorough. How she got the job. Daily interactions with Ms. Jenkins, Sterling's odd behavior, Kevin's question about her address. 40 minutes later, she signed the bottom. Hayes read it over. Good. Where are you staying now? You can't go back. With my friend Sierra. I'll give you her info. He took the details. Be careful. If they learn you survived and talked to us, they might try again. Keep your phone charged. Call 911 at any sign of trouble. Simone nodded, exhaustion crashing over her. She thanked him and stepped back into the morning sunlight. She called Sierra immediately. Girl, where are you? Are you okay? I'm fine. Can I come stay with you? For a few days, maybe longer? Of course. Come right now and start explaining, because I'm freaking out. Simone took another rideshare to Sierra's small, one-bedroom on the city's outskirts. Sierra opened the door and pulled her into a fierce hug. You look like hell, Sierra said, leading her inside. Sit, tea's coming. They settled in the kitchen. Sierra, curvy, red-haired, always the dramatic one, stared expectantly. Simone told her everything, from Ms. Jenkins's warning to the police station. Sierra's eyes grew wider with each detail. They tried to burn you alive? She whispered. Over paperwork? Looks like it. Sierra shook her head. You're staying here as long as you need. Couch pulls out. We'll figure the rest out. Simone's phone buzzed late that evening. Detective Hayes. Update, he said without preamble. Fire investigators confirmed arson. Gasoline accelerant, multiple ignition points. Highest concentration near your apartment. Clear intent to kill. Simone closed her eyes. So it's official. Yes, we're moving carefully. Tomorrow we'll interview your co-workers under routine pretense. Don't contact anyone at the firm. Let them think you're just grieving. Understood. That night on Sierra's pull-out sofa, Simone barely slept. Every creak of the building sounded like footsteps. Every car passing outside made her heart race. Wednesday morning, a text from Kayla at work. Why aren't you here? Victor's asking. Simone hesitated, then replied, Emergency. Building burned down last night. Need a few days. Kayla. OMG, are you okay? Simone. I'm safe. Tell Victor I'll handle insurance and housing stuff. She set the phone down, guilt twisting her stomach. She just confirmed to the very people who wanted her dead that she was still alive. Sierra handed her coffee. Maybe you shouldn't have answered. Too late now. They spent the day inside. Simone emailed Hayes copies of old work files she'd sent herself, reports, spreadsheets, invoices. One caught her eye. A March payment to Vector Consulting LLC for $87,000. She remembered processing it. At the time, it seemed excessive for such a small firm. But Sterling had waved it off as important partnership. She flagged it for Hayes. He called back quickly. That's gold, he said. Vector Consulting looks like a shell. We'll dig. Evening brought another call, from Kayla again, this time voice shaking. Simone, police just showed up with a search warrant. They're tearing the office apart. Victor's screaming. Kevin didn't come in today. Is this about the fire? I don't know, Simone lied. Just cooperate. I'm in a hotel dealing with everything. She hung up and told Sierra. They're searching the office now. Sierra exhaled. Good. Let them find whatever those bastards are hiding. Half an hour later, Hayes called. We got Sterling's computer, all financial records. Early look shows $500,000 in fraudulent transactions funneled through shell companies, including Vector. Kevin Barnes has a prior armed robbery conviction. We're issuing a warrant. He's gone rabbit. Simone's pulse raced. So it's all connected. Without question. Stay put. This is far from over, but we're closing in. Simone hung up, relief and fear warring inside her. The danger wasn't gone. Kevin was still out there, but the truth was coming to light. That night, nightmares returned, flames licking at her bedroom door. Kevin's face in the smoke. Gas cans clattering down the hall. She woke Thursday morning to Hayes's ringtone. Good news, he said. Gary Thompson, the Vector director, was arrested overnight. He rolled immediately. Confirmed Sterling masterminded the laundering. Sterling's in custody, charged with fraud. Attempted murder charge pending. Kevin Barnes was picked up at the bus station trying to leave town. He's talking. Says Sterling paid him $10,000 to torch your place. Hired a second man, Dwayne Harris, already in custody. Simone sat down hard on the sofa. It's over? Investigation continues, but the immediate threat is neutralized. You're safe. Tears came then, hot, unstoppable. Relief, grief for her lost home, gratitude for a homeless woman's kindness. Sierra held her while she cried. When the storm passed, Simone looked at her friend. I need to see Ms. Jenkins. Thank her properly. Sierra nodded. Go. I'll be here when you get back. Simone dressed and took the train to Peachtree Center. Ms. Jenkins was in her spot. Same faded coat, same quiet dignity. Simone crouched, tears threatening again. They caught them. All of them. Because of your photos. Ms. Jenkins smiled gently. Told you kindness comes back. Simone pulled an envelope from her pocket, $500. Every dollar she had left after the fire. Please take this. Not payment, just gratitude. Ms. Jenkins hesitated, then accepted. God bless you, child. They talked quietly as commuters rushed past. Two women whose small daily ritual of coins in a cup had rewritten both their fates. The weeks following the arrests blurred into a relentless cycle of paperwork, statements, and sleepless nights. Simone's life, already fractured by divorce, had now been scorched to the ground, literally. She had nothing left except the clothes she'd worn that fateful Monday. Her purse, phone, laptop from work, which the police had returned after imaging the drive, and the unwavering support of Sierra. Simone stayed on Sierra's pull-out sofa in the cramped one-bedroom apartment on the city's south side. Every morning she woke to the smell of strong coffee and Sierra's determined cheerfulness. Her friend never once complained about the lack of space, the extra laundry, or the way Simone sometimes cried in her sleep. The first priority was survival, insurance claims, police statements, finding a new job. The second was gratitude. Simone visited Ms. Jenkins almost daily at her usual spot by Peachtree. Center station, bringing food, small amounts of cash, and updates on the case. Detective Hayes kept her informed. The evidence was overwhelming. The seized computer files, Thompson's full confession, Kevin Barnes and Dwayne Harris naming Victor, Sterling as the mastermind behind both the fraud and the arson for murder plot. The case was solid. Trial dates were set for late summer or early fall. In mid-May, 2 weeks after the fire, Simone received the insurance payout, $90,000. It was far less than the apartment's market value or the cost of replacing everything inside. But it was something. She deposited the check and immediately paid Sierra back for groceries, ride shares, and the new clothes they'd bought together at Target the day after the fire. That same week, Simone began job hunting in earnest. She updated her resume, removing the 2.5-month stint at Prime Solutions entirely. 15 years of solid experience at her previous retail company spoke for itself. She applied to every mid-level accounting position in Atlanta that looked stable and legitimate. By the end of May, she had an interview at Summit Financial Corp, a growing financial services firm in a gleaming downtown high-rise. The HR manager, Olga Johnson, was warm and professional. The chief accountant, Brenda Jean Holloway, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with kind eyes, joined the second interview. They offered her the job on the spot, $55,000, starting salary with a raise to $65,000. After probation, full benefits, Monday to Friday, 9 to 6, weekends off. Simone accepted immediately. She started the following Monday. The office at Summit was worlds away from Prime Solutions. Open floor plan, natural light, friendly colleagues who brought in donuts on Fridays and didn't pry into personal lives. Brenda became a quiet mentor, showing Simone the systems and praising her meticulous work. "You've got an eagle eye," Brenda said one afternoon, reviewing a reconciliation Simone had caught an error in. "We need that here." For the first time in months, Simone felt a sense of normalcy returning. Housing was the next hurdle. Sierra's one bedroom was cozy for one, cramped for two. One evening over takeout Thai food, Sierra made a suggestion. "Why don't we find a two-bedroom together? Split rent, keep each other company? I'm not ready to live alone again anyway." Simone considered it. She and Sierra had been friends since college, survived breakups and bad jobs together. The idea felt safe. They spent weekends viewing apartments. The third one they saw was perfect. A bright two-bedroom on the second floor of a well-maintained building near a MARTA station, quiet neighborhood, $1750 a month. The landlady, Mrs. Dolores Washington, was a sharp-eyed retiree who wanted decent, quiet tenants. They signed the lease that day, paid first month and deposit from Simone's insurance money, and moved in the following weekend. They had almost no furniture, 2 air mattresses, a borrowed card table, Sierra's old couch, but it was theirs. Slowly, with the insurance payout and their combined salaries, they furnished it. A real kitchen table from Facebook Marketplace, beds from IKEA, thrift store lamps and rugs. By July, it felt like home. Throughout everything, Simone kept her promise to Ms. Jenkins. She visited regularly, bringing groceries, warm socks, a new coat when summer turned to cooler evenings. But she wanted to do more, something permanent. She researched senior living options in Atlanta. Public facilities had years-long wait lists. Private ones started at $3,000 a month, far beyond what Simone could afford long-term. But Detective Hayes had offered help. One August afternoon, she called him. "Hayes, it's Simone Lawson. You once mentioned you might know someone in senior services for Ms. Jenkins." A pause, then warmth in his voice. "I do. Let me make a call." 2 hours later, he phoned back with the name and number of Angela Stone, director of Serenity Gardens, a small, non-profit-assisted retirement home on the northeast side of the city. They had an unexpected opening. Simone arranged a tour the next day and brought Ms. Jenkins with her. The old woman was hesitant, clutching her worn bag, eyes wide as they drove through tree-lined streets. Serenity Gardens was modest but lovely, single-story buildings. Around a central courtyard garden, clean hallways that smelled faintly of fresh bread, residents chatting in common areas or playing cards. Angela Stone greeted them personally. She showed them the available room, small but private, with a single bed, dresser, nightstand, television, and a window overlooking flowers. 3 meals a day, nursing staff on site, weekly doctor visits, activities and transportation. Ms. Jenkins stood in the middle of the empty room, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I never thought," she whispered. "It's yours if you want it," Angela said gently. "We can move you in today." Simone squeezed her hand. "You deserve this, Ms. Jenkins. You saved my life. Let me do this for you." They spent the afternoon shopping. New clothes, pajamas, robes, slippers, toiletries, a soft blanket. Simone paid without hesitation. That evening they returned. A nurse helped. Ms. Jenkins' shower, her first proper, one in longer than she would admit, and change into fresh pajamas. When Simone went to say goodnight, the old woman was sitting on the edge of her new bed, hair combed, face shining, eyes bright. "Child," she said, voice trembling, "I feel like I'm in paradise. I can't believe this is real." "It is," Simone said, sitting beside her. "You're safe now, warm, fed, cared for." Ms. Jenkins took Simone's hand. "You gave me back my dignity. After all those years on the street, thinking nobody cared, you showed me kindness still exists." "You showed me first," Simone replied. "Every day you sat there with quiet grace. You reminded me the world isn't all cruel." They sat in silence for a while. Then Simone hugged her and left, promising to visit soon. Over the next months, Simone watched Ms. Jenkins transform. The regular meals filled out her thin frame. Her skin lost its grayish pallor. Her eyes sparkled when she talked about the garden club or the choir she'd joined. Simone visited every weekend, bringing small treats, cake from her favorite bakery, new books from the library, framed photos of Atlanta's changing seasons to hang on the wall. At work, things continued to improve. In October, Brenda promoted her to senior accountant. The raise helped ease financial worries. In November, an unexpected letter arrived at Simone's new apartment. A request from Victor Sterling's attorney for a prison visit. Sterling wanted to apologize in person. Simone wrestled with the decision for days. Part of her wanted nothing to do with the man who'd ordered her death. Another part needed closure. She agreed. The detention facility was grim, barbed wire, gray concrete, the smell of disinfectant. She passed through security and was led to a visitation booth with thick glass and phones on either side. Sterling was brought in minutes later. He looked 20 years older, gaunt, hair completely white, eyes sunken. He picked up the receiver with trembling hands. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice raspy. Simone nodded coldly. "I'm not here to make excuses," he continued. "There are none. I let greed and fear destroy everything decent in me. I ran that laundering scheme to pay debts. And when you noticed the altered invoices, I panicked. I hired Barnes to eliminate the threat. I tried to have you murdered." He paused, eyes filling. "I think about it every day in here. How close you came to dying because of my cowardice. I'm ashamed. I know you can't forgive me, and I don't deserve it. I just needed you to hear that I'm sorry. Truly." Simone studied his broken face. The anger she'd carried for months began to loosen its grip. "I won't forgive you," she said quietly. "Not today. Maybe not ever. But I see you're paying for what you did. I hope these years teach you something about the value of a human life." "They will," he whispered. "Thank you for listening. Simone hung up the phone and walked out into crisp November air. She felt lighter, as though she'd finally closed a door that had been creaking open behind her. December arrived with the first light snow. Atlanta transformed into a city of twinkling lights and holiday music. Simone and Sierra decorated their apartment with a small tree, garlands and candles that smelled like pine. On New Year's Eve, Simone brought Ms. Jenkins to the apartment for a quiet celebration. The old woman arrived with a tin of homemade cookies from the Serenity Gardens. Baking club, eyes shining at the lights. They ate collard greens and black-eyed peas for luck, watched the peach drop on television, and toasted midnight with sparkling cider. As fireworks bloomed over the city, Miss Jenkins took Simone's hand. "This has been the best year of my old life," she said softly. "Because of you." Simone smiled through tears. "And you gave me mine back." A few days later, Angela Stone called with surprising news. Ms. Jenkins's estranged daughter, Candace, had visited the home. She'd brought gifts, apologized profusely, and asked to rebuild their relationship. After a long, tearful conversation, Ms. Jenkins had agreed to try. Simone visited the following weekend and met Candace, a polished woman in her 50s who looked mortified by her past neglect. Candace thanked Simone repeatedly, promising to visit monthly and bring her own children, Ms. Jenkins's grandchildren, to meet their grandmother soon. As Simone left that day, Ms. Jenkins walked her to the door. "You didn't just save my life," the old woman said. "You gave me back my family. You showed my daughter what real kindness looks like." Simone hugged her tightly. "We saved each other." Driving home through lightly falling snow, Simone reflected on the year. From the ashes of betrayal, loss, and near death, something beautiful had grown. A new home, a meaningful job, deeper friendships, and the profound reward of having changed someone's life for the better. Kindness, she realized, had come full circle. Spring returned to Atlanta with dogwood blossoms and warm breezes that carried the scent of new growth through the open windows of Simone and Sierra's apartment. It was May 2026, Simone's 36th birthday, and the year since. The fire felt both impossibly long and impossibly short. So much had changed. Simone's promotion to senior accountant at Summit Financial Corp had come with more responsibility, a corner desk with a view of Midtown skyline, and the quiet respect of her colleagues. Brenda Jean Holloway trusted her with complex reconciliations and client audits, and Simone thrived on the clarity of honest numbers. No more wondering if a payment was legitimate. Everything at Summit was transparent, audited regularly, and above board. Sierra, meanwhile, had started dating a kind-hearted graphic designer named Marcus. They'd met at a downtown art walk, and 6 months in, things were serious enough that Sierra sometimes spent weekends at his place. She and Simone had talked about the future. If Sierra moved out, Simone could afford the 2-bedroom on her own, or they could find new roommates. But neither was in a rush. Their friendship had been tempered by crisis and come out stronger. The biggest change, though, was Ms. Thelma Mae Jenkins. Serenity Gardens had become her true home. In the years since moving in, she'd blossomed. Regular meals and health care had restored color to her cheeks and strength to her step. She'd joined the choir, the gardening club, and even taught a weekly class on old-school Southern cooking. That was so popular, the waiting list stretched for months. Residents and staff alike adored her gentle wisdom and dry humor. Her family had slowly returned too. Candace visited every other weekend now, often bringing her teenage grandchildren, Trey and Jasmine, who were shy at first, but soon warmed to their grandmother's stories and homemade pound cake. Candace's brother, Ms. Jenkins's son Leonard, had called once from California after Candace reached out to him. The conversation had been stiff, full of old hurts, but he'd promised to think about visiting. Ms. Jenkins didn't push. She'd learned long ago that forgiveness couldn't be forced. It had to grow on its own time. Simone visited every Saturday without fail. Sometimes she came alone with a bookstore bag of new novels or a box of fancy teas. Sometimes Sierra tagged along with fresh flowers. Occasionally, Candace and the grandkids were there, and the room filled with overlapping voices and laughter. On Simone's birthday, Sierra threw a small party at the apartment. She invited a dozen people, co-workers from Summit, Marcus and a couple of his friends, 2 neighbors from their building, and, at Simone's insistence, Ms. Jenkins and Candace. The old woman arrived in a new spring dress. Candace had bought her, soft lavender that made her eyes shine, and carrying a homemade caramel cake that drew gasps of delight. Candace brought balloons and a gift bag with a silver necklace engraved with a simple word: gratitude. The party was relaxed, jazz playing low, Marcus grilling on the tiny balcony, Sierra's famous shrimp and grits circulating on paper plates. People mingled easily. Brenda from work chatted with Candace about raising teenagers. Trey and Jasmine, bored at first, ended up listening wide-eyed as Ms. Jenkins told stories about growing up in rural Georgia during the 1950s. Near the end of the evening, Sierra dimmed the lights and brought out the caramel cake with 36 candles blazing. Everyone sang. Simone closed her eyes to make a wish: health and peace for the people in this room, and blew them out in one breath. Then Ms. Jenkins stood, tapping her plastic cup with a spoon until the room quieted. "I ain't much for speeches," she began, voice steady but thick with emotion. "But I need to say something tonight." She looked around the room, eyes lingering on each face before settling on Simone. "A little over a year ago, I was sitting on a piece of cardboard outside the MARTA station, cold, hungry, and thinking the world had forgotten me. My children had turned away. My body was giving out. I'd made my peace with dying on the street. Then this young woman started walking past every morning. She didn't look through me like most folks do. She looked at me. She spoke, and every single day she dropped what she could into my cup. Sometimes it was coins, sometimes $1 or $2. Once, when it was pouring rain, she bought me a hot coffee and a biscuit without saying a word. I didn't know her name for weeks, but I started praying for her every night, that God would bless the kind heart who saw me as a person. Then one morning I saw something evil coming for her. Men with gasoline and bad intentions. God put me in the right place to warn her, to take pictures, to help the police. But truth is, he was just giving back what she'd already given me: kindness. She listened to an old homeless woman when nobody else would have. She lived because of it. And because she lived, she turned around and gave me a whole new life. A home, safety, family again, dignity. Ms. Jenkins's voice cracked. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small tissue-wrapped package. "This ain't much," she said, handing it to Simone. "But I wanted you to have something made with love." Simone unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a handmade quilt square, about 12 inches across, stitched with tiny, perfect stitches. In the center, embroidered in deep green thread against a cream background, were the words, "Kindness comes back." Around the border, smaller stitches formed tiny symbols: a coffee cup, a MARTA train, flames, a garden flower, a house. "I'm working on a full quilt," Ms. Jenkins explained. "The ladies in the sewing circle are helping. When it's done, it'll go on your bed. But I wanted you to have this piece now for your birthday." Simone's eyes filled. She stood and hugged the old woman tightly, feeling fragile bones and fierce strength. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's perfect." The room erupted in applause. Someone started another round of "Happy birthday." Simone looked around. Through tears at Sierra beaming beside Marcus, Brenda raising her cup in salute, Candace wiping her eyes, Trey and Jasmine clapping, enthusiastically, and felt something settle deep in her chest. This was family, not the one she'd been born into or married into, but the one built from shared survival, loyalty, and love freely given. Later, after the guests left and the dishes were done, Simone and Sierra sat on the balcony with the last slices of caramel, cake, and cups of decaf coffee. "You know," Sierra said quietly, "a year ago you were coming off a divorce, starting a sketchy job, barely holding it together. Now look at you. New career, this apartment, all these people who love you. And you changed an old woman's entire life." Simone gazed at the city lights below. "I think we changed each other's." Sierra nodded. "Ms. Jenkins is right. Kindness really does come back. Not always when you expect it or how, but it does." They sat in comfortable silence until the cake was gone, and the night air turned cool. Summer brought more milestones. In July, the trials concluded. Victor Sterling was convicted on all counts: fraud, money laundering, and attempted murder, and sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Kevin Barnes and Dwayne Harris each received 15 years for arson and attempted murder. Gary Thompson got 5 years for his role in the fraud. Simone testified calmly, recounting the events without drama. When the verdicts were read, she felt no triumph, only a quiet finality. The chapter was closed. In August, Leonard, Ms. Jenkins's son, flew in from California for a long weekend. Simone met him at Serenity Gardens, tall, graying, carrying the weight of regret in his shoulders. The reunion was tearful, halting, but real. He stayed 4 days, sleeping on Candace's couch, spending every daylight hour with his mother. When he left, he promised to return for Thanksgiving and to help pay for any extras the facility didn't cover. Ms. Jenkins told Simone later, "He's trying. That's all I ever wanted." Fall painted the city in reds and golds. Simone's quilt arrived in October, full-sized, breathtaking. Dozens of squares stitched by the Serenity Gardens sewing circle, each telling part of the story. The MARTA station, the fire, the police, the garden, the new apartment, faces of Sierra, Candace, even Detective Hayes. In the center, the original square Simone had received on her birthday. She spread it across her bed the same day it arrived and cried happy tears into its soft folds. Thanksgiving that year was held at Serenity Gardens. The facility hosted a big community dinner, but Ms. Jenkins reserved the private dining room for family. Candace and her husband hosted. Leonard flew in again with his wife. The grandchildren came, Sierra and Marcus attended, and Simone brought 3 pies from her favorite bakery. The table groaned under turkey, dressing, greens, candied yams, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, the works. Grace was said by Ms. Jenkins herself, her voice clear and strong. "We gather today," she said, "not just to eat, but to give thanks for second chances, for family found again, for strangers who become angels, for life when we thought it was over, and most of all, for kindness, the small, quiet kind that changes everything." Every head nodded. Every eye was wet. As plates were passed and stories told, Simone looked around the table and felt overwhelming gratitude. She had lost a marriage, a home, nearly her life, but she had gained so much more. December approached again, another holiday season, another circle around the sun. Simone's life was stable, full, meaningful. She had love in many forms, purpose in her work, and the deep satisfaction of knowing one consistent act of compassion had rippled outward in ways she never could have imagined. On December 23rd, she drove to Serenity Gardens with a car full of wrapped gifts. Ms. Jenkins met her at the door, bundled in a new coat Simone had bought her the previous month. "Merry Christmas, baby," the old woman said, hugging her tight. "Merry Christmas, Mama Jenkins," Simone replied, a nickname that had started as a joke, but now felt completely natural. They spent the afternoon decorating the common room tree, sipping hot chocolate, singing carols with the other residents. When dusk fell and the lights twinkled on, Ms. Jenkins pulled Simone aside. "I got one more thing for you," she said, handing over a small box. Inside was a silver locket, engraved on the front, "Kindness comes back." Inside, 2 tiny photos, one of Simone on her birthday, smiling surrounded by friends, and one of Ms. Jenkins in her garden, healthy and radiant. "So you always remember," Ms. Jenkins said softly, "that what you give away never really leaves you. It comes back bigger, better when you need it most." Simone fastened the locket around her neck, where it settled warm against her skin. "I'll never forget," she whispered. Outside, the first gentle snow of the season began to fall, blanketing Atlanta in quiet white. Inside, 2 women, one young, one old, stood arm in arm, watching the world transform. The circle was complete. December 23rd, 2025, dawned crisp and bright in Atlanta. A light dusting of snow from the night before glittered on rooftops and sidewalks, turning the city into a postcard scene. Simone Lawson stood at her bedroom window, coffee mug warming her hands, watching the neighborhood wake up. At 36, she felt older and younger at the same time, scarred by fire and loss, but renewed by everything that had grown in its place. Today was special for more than the nearness of Christmas. It marked exactly 20 months, since the morning Miss Jenkins had gripped her wrist outside the MARTA station and whispered, "Don't go home tonight." 20 months since flames had taken her apartment and nearly her life. 20 months since a simple daily act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that rewrote multiple destinies. Simone's phone buzzed on the dresser. A text from Sierra. "Running late. Marcus's car won't start. Pick you up in 45? We'll get Mama Jenkins together." Simone smiled. Mama Jenkins had become everyone's name for Ms. Thelma Mae Jenkins now. It had started as Simone's affectionate slip. Then Sierra adopted it, then Candace and the grandchildren. Even the staff at Serenity Gardens used it with warm smiles. She replied, "No rush. I'll make extra cookies for the road." The past year and a half had been one of steady healing and quiet miracles. Work at Summit Financial Corp continued to be a blessing. After her promotion to senior accountant, Simone had taken on leadership of a small team. Brenda Jean Holloway was grooming her for chief accountant when Brenda retired in a few years. The salary increases had allowed Simone to pay off the last of her post-divorce debts and build a comfortable savings account. She no longer worried about unexpected expenses. Sierra and Marcus had gotten engaged in September. They were planning a small spring wedding, and Sierra had already given notice on the apartment they'd move into Marcus's larger house after the honeymoon. Simone wasn't worried. She could easily afford the 2-bedroom alone now, and the idea of having the place to herself felt peaceful rather than lonely. But the heart of her new life remained Ms. Jenkins. Serenity Gardens had become Simone's second home. She visited 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes staying for dinner or movie nights. In the common room, Ms. Jenkins' health was the best it had been in decades. No more winters on the street. Regular doctor visits, balanced meals. At 81, she moved with surprising energy, leading the choir, organizing holiday craft fairs, and mentoring younger residents who struggled with family estrangement. Her own family had grown close again. Candace came every weekend now, often with Trey and Jasmine, who called Ms. Jenkins Granny Thelma, and fought over whose turn it was to push her wheelchair through the gardens, even though she rarely needed it. Leonard had moved back to Georgia 6 months ago, taking a job in Macon so he could drive up regularly. His wife Maria and their 2 adult daughters joined him for holidays. The first family Thanksgiving the previous month had been loud, chaotic, and perfect. 23 people crammed around tables in Serenity Gardens. Private dining room, Ms. Jenkins at the head. Tears in her eyes as she carved the turkey. Simone dressed warmly, a red sweater and jeans. Her silver locket with the engraved photos of herself and Ms. Jenkins resting against her heart. She packed the cookies she'd baked the night before, Ms. Jenkins's own oatmeal raisin recipe, into a tin, grabbed the stack of wrapped presents from under the small tree in the living room, and waited for Sierra. They picked up Ms. Jenkins at 11 a.m. She emerged from Serenity Gardens in a new winter coat, a group gift from the residents, and a festive red hat Candace had knitted. Her face lit up when she saw them. "My girls," she said, hugging them both fiercely. "Merry almost Christmas." The drive to Candace's house in Decatur took 40 minutes. Holiday music played low on the radio. The 3 women talked over each other about recipes. Gossip from the retirement home, Sierra's wedding plans. Simone glanced in the rearview mirror and caught Ms. Jenkins's eyes, bright, content, full of life, and felt her throat tighten with gratitude. Candace's house was already bustling when they arrived. Trey and Jasmine ran out to help carry presents. Leonard and Maria were in the kitchen basting a ham. Candace's husband grilled on the back deck despite the cold. The smell of pine from the towering Christmas tree mixed with cinnamon and cloves. The day unfolded like a dream. Children's laughter echoed as gifts were piled under the tree. Leonard told stories about his new job. Maria showed photos of their California house, now on the market. Trey demonstrated a new dance move he'd learned. Jasmine sang along to carols with Granny Thelma's strong alto backing her up. Dinner was served at 3. Ham, turkey, candied yams, collards, cornbread dressing, macaroni and cheese, cranberry sauce, and 3 kinds of pie. Ms. Jenkins insisted on saying grace. "Heavenly Father," she began, voice carrying easily over the crowded table, "we thank you for this food, for this family gathered together, when we once thought we'd never sit at the same table again. Thank you for second chances, for forgiveness, for love that finds its way back home, and thank you most of all for the stranger who became family, for Simone, who saw an old woman on the street and treated her like a person. Because of her kindness, I'm here today. Because of her courage, we're all here. Remind us always to pass that kindness on." Amens rippled around the table. Simone wiped tears discreetly. After dinner, the adults lingered, over coffee while the kids played outside in the thin snow. Ms. Jenkins found Simone in the living room, gazing at the twinkling tree lights. "Sit with me a minute, baby," she said, patting the couch. Simone sat, Ms. Jenkins took her hand. "I've been thinking about today's date. 20 months since that morning at the station." Simone nodded. "I was thinking the same thing. I want you to know something." Ms. Jenkins's grip was firm despite her age. "You didn't just save my life that day the police caught those men. You saved it the first morning you dropped change in my cup and looked me in the eye. You reminded me I was still human, still worthy of notice. Everything after, the home, my children coming back. This beautiful day, it all started there." Simone shook her head. "You saved me first, literally." Ms. Jenkins smiled. "We saved each other. That's how it works when kindness is real. It don't keep score. It just keeps moving." She reached into her purse and pulled out a final small box wrapped in gold paper. "One last thing," she said. Simone opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm. A tiny circle engraved with the same words as her locket and the quilt square. "Kindness comes back." "I had it made special," Ms. Jenkins explained. "A circle because that's what we've come to. Full circle. You gave to me, I gave back to you, you gave again, and now here we are, family." Simone fastened the bracelet around her wrist, where it caught the tree lights and sparkled. "I'll wear it always," she said. Evening fell. The grandchildren performed an impromptu Christmas pageant, complete with bath towel robes and a baby doll. Jesus that had everyone laughing until their sides hurt. Photos were taken, Ms. Jenkins surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Then the entire group with Simone and Sierra included, arms linked. When it was time to leave, hugs lasted long minutes. Promises of tomorrow's Christmas morning brunch at Serenity Gardens were made. Simone drove Ms. Jenkins back first, the roads quiet under streetlights. At the retirement home entrance, Ms. Jenkins turned to her. "You heading home now?" Simone nodded. "Long day, but the best kind." Ms. Jenkins studied her face in the porch light. "You know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "A woman who's whole. You lost a marriage, a home, almost your life. But you didn't let it make you bitter. You let it make you better, kinder, stronger. That's rare, baby. That's a gift." Simone felt tears rise again. "You taught me that." "No," Ms. Jenkins said firmly. "You already had it inside you. I just helped bring it out." They hugged one last time. "Merry Christmas, Mama Jenkins." "Merry Christmas, daughter." Simone drove home through the snowy city, bracelet glinting on her wrist, locket warm against her heart, the quilt waiting on her bed. She thought about the journey. From a lonely divorced woman, dropping coins into a tin cup to this rich, connected life surrounded by chosen family. Kindness had come back, yes, but more than that, it had multiplied, spreading outward in ways she never could have predicted, touching lives she hadn't even met yet. As she pulled into her parking spot and looked up at the lighted windows of her apartment, safe, warm, hers, she whispered a quiet thank you to the universe, to fate, to whatever force had aligned that one ordinary Monday morning 20 months ago. The circle wasn't just complete, it was infinite, and tomorrow she would pass the kindness on again.